Hello, friends. If you're excited to dive into the story of The Little Mermaid, 2023, in English, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join a community that loves exploring the best movies. Let's get started. Beneath the tide where sunlight only dares to kiss the crests of waves, in a world of coral castles and melodies carried through the deep, a story as old as longing begins again. But this time, it sings with new breath. It doesn't just revisit a tale told before, it reimagines it, enriches it, and dives deeper than the waters it so lovingly portrays. In a place where voices carry magic and choices ripple far beyond their surface, we meet a young soul whose heart yearns for a world that was never meant to welcome her. From the first shimmer of fins to the final swell of its score, this film casts a spell not simply through nostalgia, but through the courage to look at a familiar story through new eyes. The underwater kingdom is vibrant and alive, not just a setting, but a living, breathing extension of its characters. From the soft pulse of jellyfish floating like lanterns to the vast blue void that stretches toward the forbidden world above, every frame feels both enchanted and heavy with the ache of what can't be. At the center of it all is a girl who sings to the moonlight. A girl whose voice holds 1,000 dreams and a quiet defiance. She doesn't just collect treasures from the surface. She collects questions, hopes, and the silent desire to be seen for who she really is. Her name isn't just a name. It's a promise. A current waiting to pull everything off course. When she saves a stranger from the wreckage of a storm, his world crashing into hers in fire and fear, it sets off a chain of events that challenges everything she's been told. Love, perhaps, is the spark. But it's identity that fuels her fire. It's not just about romance. It's about self. The right to walk, to speak, to choose. And the price of that freedom? It's her voice, the very thing that defines her, given up in a moment of desperate, determined longing. But nothing in this story is simple. Not the villain, who slinks through the dark with a smile too wide and a charm too sharp. Not the prince, who isn't just handsome and kind, but layered with uncertainty and wonder of his own. Not the father, powerful and proud, holding his daughter too close to realize he might be breaking her heart. This isn't a story of good and evil. It's a story of growing pains, of finding truth in the in-between, of walking where you were told never to tread, and discovering who you are when the tides change. The transformation, when it comes, is painful and poetic. Legs where fins used to be. A voice trapped in silence. Every step on land is a triumph and a trial, and still she moves forward. Because the world above may be strange, but it's also wondrous. And there, she begins to find pieces of herself in sunsets and starlight, in laughter and dance, in books and whispered songs. But time is not kind. And promises made in seafoam have their price. The ocean doesn't forget. Nor do those who move through it. A deadline looms. A deal must be fulfilled. And when betrayal comes, not from her, but from those who fear her light, it nearly swallows everything. The quiet twist is not just in magic turning against her, but in the realization that the greatest power she ever had was never her voice, it was her will. Her ability to choose love, choose sacrifice, choose to rewrite her fate even when everything is pulling her down. And that moment, the one where all seems lost, when the ocean turns wild and the truth crashes like a wave, is where the film reveals its heart. Because it's not about changing for someone else. It's about becoming who you were always meant to be. Even when the world above doesn't understand. Even when the world below tries to hold you back. Even when it hurts. This story isn't just about a girl who wanted legs. It's about the cost of dreams. The weight of love. The quiet strength of believing you are enough. And as the credits roll and the tide rolls out, you're left with something more than nostalgia. You're left with the echo of a voice, pure, powerful, and free, reminding you that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is rise from the depths and sing your truth into the world. It begins not with the crash of waves, but with the hush of mystery. Deep below where human light cannot reach, where the ocean breathes in rhythms older than memory. The kingdom beneath the sea is not silent. It pulses with life, color, and music that moves not only through water but through the hearts of those who dwell in it. Here, in the coral halls of the Sea King's domain, every creature has its place, every current its direction. And yet, in the midst of this harmony, one voice swims against the tide. She is the youngest of her father's daughters, and the most curious. While her sisters revel in song and tradition, she gazes toward the surface with questions that have no answers. Her eyes carry the wonder of someone who feels out of step with the world she was born into. The sea tells her to be still, to obey, to hide from the dangers of the land above. But her heart beats to a different rhythm, one filled with longing, with defiance, with dreams shaped like stars and firelight. She doesn't speak of this to her father. King Triton, ruler of the sea, loves his children with a fierceness that borders on control. He fears the world above, where humans hunt and destroy. He's seen the cost of trust given too freely. So he teaches caution. He commands distance. But the very boundaries he sets only deepen her desire to cross them. Her only companions in these secret thoughts are two unlikely friends, a nervous crab named Sebastian, loyal to the king yet torn by affection for her, and Flounder, a bright-eyed fish who follows her into danger with the unwavering loyalty of a true friend. Together, they explore shipwrecks and sunken places, collecting trinkets from the world above, a fork mistaken for a comb, a broken telescope seen as treasure. These objects become symbols of something bigger, a life she can imagine but has never touched. And then, one night, the storm comes. The sea churns as a ship fights to stay afloat. Above the water, music and laughter fill the air, human sounds, strange and intoxicating. Drawn to the surface like a moth to flame, she watches from behind a wave's crest, captivated by the world dancing just out of reach. And then she sees him. Prince Eric. Not a god. Not a myth. Just a man. And yet, something in the way he moves, the way he looks at the sky, the way he smiles, it stirs something in her. A recognition. Not love, not yet. But connection. He stands at the edge of his ship, fearless and curious, much like her, looking out toward the unknown. When lightning cracks the sky and fire consumes the mast, chaos erupts. The ship is lost to the waves. And as the prince is thrown into the sea, unconscious and sinking fast, she dives without hesitation. Through the wreckage, through the smoke, through her own fear, she pulls him to the shore. The beach is quiet, the storm past. She sings to him, not words, but something deeper. A melody born of her longing and his stillness. Her voice carries the ache of the ocean and the promise of something new. When he stirs, barely awake, her eyes are the last thing he sees before she vanishes beneath the waves. Back beneath the sea, everything changes. A melody born of her longing and his stillness. Her voice carries the ache of the ocean and the promise of something new. When he stirs, barely awake, her eyes are the last thing he sees before she vanishes beneath the waves. Back beneath the sea, everything changes. Triton hears whispers of her trip to the surface. Sebastian, torn between duty and care, cannot keep the secret. And so the confrontation comes. The king, furious and afraid, destroys her collection, her treasures, her dreams, shattering them with his trident in a fury of glowing rage. The act wounds her more deeply than any punishment. He wasn't just breaking things. He was breaking the part of her that dared to believe in something more. But where pain blooms, so does resolve. And from the shadows, someone else has been watching. Ursula, a sea witch, cast out and seething with bitterness. She sees in the young mermaid a chance, not just for revenge against the king who exiled her, but for control, for power, for a bargain that seems, on its surface, like salvation. She offers her a deal, legs in place of fins. A chance to walk on land, to find the prince, to live among humans. But at a price. Her voice, the very thing that defines her, will be the payment. If she can win true love's kiss within 3 days, she remains human forever. If not, she belongs to Ursula. It's a cruel deal masked in honeyed words. But desperation makes fools of even the wisest. And so, against the warnings of her friends, against the fear in her chest, she agrees. The transformation is agony. Bones shift. Fins tear. Water becomes air. Sound becomes silence. And she wakes, gasping on the shore, naked in a world she's only imagined, voiceless, vulnerable, but alive. The days that follow are filled with wonder and confusion. Every step on her new legs is pain, but also power. She sees the sun for the first time through human eyes, feels wind on her skin, smells bread baking, dogs barking, laughter ringing, and in the midst of it all him, the prince. He finds her wandering, clothes torn, barefoot, and takes her in with kindness. There is no recognition. Her voice, the one he remembers, is gone. But something in her eyes stirs something in him. Familiarity. Echoes of that moment on the beach. They begin to spend time together. Not lovers yet, but something gentler. A dance of curiosity. She listens more than she speaks. Watches more than she acts. But through it all, a bond forms. But time is not their ally. 3 days pass quickly. And far below, Ursula watches. Not with worry, but with glee. Because she never meant for the girl to win. The voice she took, she wears it now. Disguised as a beautiful stranger, she arrives on the prince's doorstep with a spellbound smile and a song that matches the memory he's been chasing. He falls under the enchantment. Not because he loves her, but because magic wraps around truth like fog around a flame. The wedding is announced. And as the sun rises on the 3rd day, the girl who gave everything for a dream begins to fade. But the ocean has a rhythm. And the heart, no matter how muted, still beats loud beneath the silence. The truth, like a tide, always finds a way back. And when it rises, everything changes. The morning arrives dressed in celebration. The castle by the sea bursts with preparations, flags fluttering in the breeze, flowers strewn along the walkways, musicians tuning their strings with anticipation. A wedding is set to take place, and the entire kingdom seems to hum with excitement. Yet beneath the joy, beneath the golden light, a quiet dread stirs in the heart of the one who walks without a voice. She stands at the edge of it all, watching, waiting, unraveling. Time has turned against her, and the warmth she felt in her fleeting moments with the prince has chilled into a bitter ache. He no longer looks at her the same way. Not since the arrival of the mysterious woman with the hypnotic smile and the voice that once belonged to her. The voice he remembers from the shore. The voice he believes belongs to another. And there she is, the impostor, cloaked in beauty, her movements calculated, her laughter too bright. No one sees the flicker in her eyes when she turns away. No one hears the echo of triumph under her breath. For beneath the illusion lies Ursula, the sea witch, transformed and treacherous, spinning her web of deceit ever tighter around the prince's mind. The girl tries to stop it, tries to warn him without words. She gestures, pleads, follows him through the garden, across the stone courtyards, through the halls she once dreamed of walking. But silence is a cruel barrier. And every attempt is misunderstood, every sign misread. She is treated with kindness, yes, but not belief. Meanwhile, Sebastian and Flounder, frantic and determined, race against time. Having uncovered Ursula's scheme, they swim and scramble and fly with the help of Scuttle the seagull, a fluttering force of chaos and heart. Together, they devise a plan not just to stop the wedding, but to reveal the truth. And so, just as the sun dips low and the vows begin, chaos descends. Scuttle bursts into the ceremony, feathers flying, squawking warnings. Flounder splashes from the sea. Sebastian scurries through the aisles. And in the confusion, The shell around Ursula's neck, glowing with stolen magic, is shattered. The voice escapes. It rises into the air like a golden wisp, returning to its rightful owner with a force that knocks the breath from her chest. She gasps. And then she sings. A single note. But it's enough. The prince freezes. He knows that voice. He remembers. And the enchantment breaks. But the moment of victory is brief. For Ursula, robbed of her prize, erupts in rage. Her disguise shatters like glass. The illusion melts away, revealing her true form, towering, tentacled, terrifying. She seizes the girl and vanishes into the sea, dragging her into the depths from which she came. The waters churn with fury. Triton, alerted by Sebastian, confronts Ursula in the cavernous shadows of the deep. A battle of wills ensues, not just of power, but of sacrifice. To save his daughter, to undo the deal, Triton surrenders his trident, his throne, his very being. He becomes a withered shadow. Sinking into the seabed, Ursula rises, now holding the full power of the ocean in her grip. With the trident crackling in her hand, she grows monstrous, summoning whirlpools and lightning, the sea trembling beneath her command. She is wrath given form. And at the center of it all, the girl, once voiceless, now full of purpose, fights not with might, but with heart. She refuses to be silenced again. At the surface, the storm brews violently. Ships are tossed like toys. The sky turns black. The prince, realizing the truth and the danger, does not hesitate. He sails into the storm, determined to save the girl who saved him. His vessel creaks and groans against the waves, but he presses forward, guided by memory, by love, by something stronger than logic. Below, in the eye of the chaos, Ursula looms over the girl, laughter echoing through the water. But in her arrogance, she underestimates the very force she stole. The trident pulses in her hand, but it does not belong to her. And in that misalignment, a sliver of weakness appears. The prince strikes. Using the wreckage of his ship, he hurls a broken mast like a spear through the heart of the storm. It pierces Ursula's chest, just as a surge of stolen power explodes from her body. She screams, the ocean recoiling from her like a breath drawn in too fast. The trident slips from her grasp, sinking into the deep. And with it, her magic breaks. Triton is restored, his body and power returning in a wave of golden light. The sea calms. The skies clear. And for a moment, everything is still. The girl floats in the water, caught between two worlds. The prince swims to her. Their eyes meet. She sings again, soft, unsure. But this time, he doesn't need the voice. He already knows. They are together. But the question remains, where do they belong? Triton, watching from a distance, sees his daughter for who she truly is, not a rebellious child, but a bridge. Between sea and land. Between fear and hope. In a moment that glistens with sorrow and grace, he raises the trident. A soft glow surrounds her. And once again, she transforms. Legs beneath her. A heart unburdened. No spell. No debt. Just a gift, from a father finally willing to let go. She walks toward the shore. The prince meets her halfway. There are no words at first. Just hands. Just breath. Just the quiet understanding of two lives forever changed. Their story doesn't end in spectacle. It ends in sunlight. In soft waves lapping at the sand. In the knowledge that love, true love, doesn't demand silence or sacrifice. It invites growth, it celebrates voice, it allows choice. And somewhere beneath the sea, the coral kingdom continues, the currents flowing as they always have. But now, there's a new story whispered among the reefs. A song about a girl who rose from the deep, not to escape, but to become. And her voice? It was never truly lost. It was simply waiting to be heard. She begins as a silhouette against the shimmer of coral light, half hidden by kelp, half revealed by curiosity. She is not loud. She is not reckless. She is not fearless. But she is full. Full of wonder. Full of longing. Full of a voice that wants not only to sing, but to be heard. And that, more than anything, is what defines her. The girl with the red hair and the questioning heart. The one who swims too close to the surface. Who gathers remnants of a world forbidden to her. Who listens to the stories of the land not with judgment, but with fascination. She doesn't just collect human objects. She collects ideas, possibilities, imagined futures. She carries these dreams like pearls in the pocket of her soul. She is not naive. She is hopeful. And there's a difference. Her name has echoed for decades, told and retold in countless forms. But here, in this story, she breathes in new dimensions. The innocence remains, yes, but it is shaded by something deeper. Agency, empathy, and a quiet defiance that is not loud but rooted. She is not chasing love because she's lost without it. She's chasing freedom. The right to move, to choose, to explore. Love is a part of that. But it's not the whole. From the first time we see her, swimming not with her sisters but alone, she is already stepping outside of expectation. She does not rebel to hurt. She rebels to understand. And that's what makes her story resonate so deeply. Because she's not just fighting a monster or escaping a curse. She's facing the timeless, universal question, what if there's more? And yet, she is not perfect. She makes choices driven by emotion. She signs deals too hastily. She trusts too easily. But it is never framed as foolishness. It is framed as being young. And not in the diminutive sense, but in the human one. The growing one. The way she learns from her silence is not through punishment, but through reflection. When her voice is taken, we see the depth of her character not shrink, but expand. She must speak through action, through expression, through the language of movement. And we see then that her power was never only in her voice. It was in her spirit. That transformation, fins to feet, voice to silence, is not just magical. It's metaphorical. A coming of age in every sense. Painful. Awkward. Beautiful. Her walk is wobbly. Her steps are uncertain. And yet, she doesn't retreat. She watches the world with wide, delighted eyes. A dinglehopper becomes a hairbrush. A mocket becomes a marvel. She dances not just because the music plays, but because she can. Because she is there. On the shore. Breathing air. Feeling earth. Her relationship with the prince is a slow burn of glances, shared smiles, and miscommunications. He doesn't fall for her because of a spell. He falls for her because of her presence, her curiosity, her quiet strength. And as he begins to see her not as a girl without a voice, but as someone who listens with her whole being, their bond grows in silence, an intimacy few words can replicate. The prince, too, is not the flat figure from tales past. He is curious, intelligent, restless. He seeks meaning beyond the palace walls. He plays music, reads, connects with people beyond their title. When he speaks of the girl who saved him, he doesn't describe her looks. He describes the feeling she left behind. That moment on the shore, the voice that held something ancient and aching. But he is flawed too. He is enchanted. He is fooled. He nearly chooses a shadow over the truth. And that is what makes him real. Not his perfection, but his willingness to see beyond it. When he finally recognizes the truth, he acts, not to rescue, but to fight beside her. Their love story is not one of rescue. It is one of recognition. And around them, other characters orbit with weight and meaning. Triton, the Sea King, is not merely a strict father. He is a grieving one. A ruler burdened by loss and fear. He loves his daughter, yes, but he also fears the world she yearns for. And in that fear, He becomes controlling, overbearing. He speaks with thunder when she needs rain. But his arc is perhaps one of the most quietly powerful in the film. When he sees her hurt, not from the world above, but from his own hands, he doesn't double down. He softens. His journey is not just about letting her go. It's about learning to trust her. And in doing so, he changes. Not because he is forced to, but because he chooses to. Sebastian is no longer a caricature. He is duty-bound, yes, comedic at times, but also loyal. His role as guardian shifts into that of accomplice. He tries to protect her through rules, but learns that sometimes protection means belief. He doesn't just sing for her. He watches over her, fights for her, worries for her with the heart of someone who has come to see her not as a task, but as a daughter of his own making. Flounder, ever faithful, represents the innocence that anchors the story. He doesn't question her dreams. He simply follows. Because to him, her longing is not dangerous. It is true. And his belief in her is unwavering. Then there's Ursula. Not just a villain, but a mirror. A twisted echo of the girl's desire. She doesn't steal voices for fun. She steals power. She understands longing. She understands what it means to feel cast out, unseen. That's why her manipulation is so effective. She offers not pain, but possibility. A shortcut to the surface. A bargain with a hook. She plays the part with theatrical glee, yes, but there's a bitterness beneath her charm. A hunger. She is what the girl might become if her longing ever turned to rage. Her disguise as a rival suitor is not just deception. Her disguise as a rival suitor is not just deception. It's thematic. She uses the girl's own voice, her truth, to rob her of recognition. That's the cruelty. That the very thing which defines her, the thing she sacrificed for love, is used to take that love away. And yet she does not fall. She rises. Not with violence. Not with revenge. But with clarity. Even in silence, she persists. Even in pain, she hopes. She fights not because she is strong, but because she is true. Her arc is not about becoming someone else. It's about becoming herself, fully. About reclaiming her voice, literally and figuratively, and using it not to win, but to be heard. When she finally sings again, it is not for love. It is for freedom. That moment, when her voice returns, is not triumphant because of volume. It's triumphant because of choice. She chooses to speak, to confront, to declare. And when she does, the world around her shifts. Triton hears her. The prince sees her. The sea answers. And when the story closes, it doesn't end with happily ever after. It ends with becoming. With a father learning to let go, not in sorrow, but in pride. With a prince walking beside a woman who walks tall. With a girl no longer looking up from the water, but standing on the shore, finally whole. Because the characters in this story don't just fill roles. They live arcs. They shift. They learn. And in doing so, they remind us that true transformation doesn't come from magic. It comes from voice. From choice. From the courage to swim beyond what we've been told, and find on the other side of silence the sound of our true selves singing freely. It was always destined to be more than just a retelling. From the moment the first underwater ripple of its production began, there was a sense, unspoken at first, then murmured in the hallways of sound stages and across the call sheets, that this film would carry something unexpected. Not just a return to a classic tale, but a reinvention that would challenge, surprise, and, at times, even bewilder those tasked with bringing it to life. And as cameras rolled and sets rose and performances began to breathe, the world behind the scenes began to mirror the ocean it was trying to create. Vast, mysterious, and full of strange undercurrents. One of the most whispered about aspects of the production was how difficult it was to find the right voice for the sea, not just the literal voice of the lead, but the sonic identity of the world beneath the waves. The sound design team reportedly spent weeks recording water sounds from over 40 different locations: natural lakes, coral reefs, artificial tanks, even inside the hull of a sunken ship, before finally blending them into something that didn't sound like our ocean at all, but rather the ocean as it might sound to a mermaid. Filtered, rhythmic, fluid but not static. A world that sang, sighed, and responded. And when they found that sound, something shifted. The actors noticed it during ADR sessions. One whispered, "It's like the sea is listening." But the strangeness wasn't confined to post-production. From the earliest days on set, odd little coincidences began to surface. Production was constantly shifting due to unpredictable weather. Even though most of the film was shot on sound stages or underwater rigs, somehow storms still managed to disrupt their schedules. The cast began joking that the sea goddess herself was watching, and perhaps not thrilled with how her kingdom was being reimagined. Rain would fall indoors. Lights would flicker. Water tanks would drain and refill overnight, despite being locked down. A crew member once arrived to find their notes, scribbled storyboard sketches, floating, fully intact, in a glass tank that had been empty the night before. Then there was the matter of the costume pearls. Over 4,000 artificial pearls were hand-stitched into various costumes across the film, particularly those belonging to the sisters. But on multiple occasions they would fall off, only to be found hours later in places they hadn't been. On the director's chair. Inside an actor's boot. Nestled in the crook of a lighting rig. No one could explain it. Pearls became a kind of unofficial mascot. Everyone started keeping one in their pocket or taping them to their walkies for good luck. The makeup department eventually gave each lead performer a pearl sewn into their hair or wardrobe to keep the ocean happy, as they said with nervous laughter. A major logistical feat that became the stuff of behind-the-scenes legend was the creation of the tail rigs. The tails weren't just props, they were technical marvels. Each was custom designed with internal wiring, motion sensors, and sometimes animatronics, depending on the scene. What made them strange was how they seemed to develop personalities. One actress swore her tail twitched during breaks. Another's would bend oddly to the left, no matter how many times it was recalibrated. The head of the effects team, a hardened veteran of sci-fi blockbusters, called them the most temperamental pieces of equipment I've ever met. Not worked with. Met, but perhaps the eeriest story involved the mirror scene. In a pivotal underwater sequence, the lead character is meant to gaze into a mirror, one that reflects her both as she is and as the woman she could become. The mirror was custom-built with digital overlays to create the illusion, but something else showed up during playback. In the raw footage, a faint outline, like a shadow, a smudge, seemed to move independently of the actress's performance. It wasn't in the animation files. It wasn't a lighting glitch. It looked almost human. But it only appeared in one take and never again. The director, visibly unsettled during editing, chose to keep the take. It gave the scene depth, he said cryptically. That sequence would go on to become one of the most discussed in audience forums, not because of that shadow, which viewers never knew about, but because so many claimed it felt like someone else was watching her. Even the voice work came with its own mysteries. To prepare for the transformation scenes, especially those where the lead must perform voiceless, the actress worked with a vocal coach not to speak, but to communicate through absence. They developed a system of breath patterns, gestures, and eye movements that would express a full emotional spectrum without a single word. The result was so convincing that some scenes were left completely unscored to highlight the sheer emotional power of silence. But one session between the actress and coach took a bizarre turn, as she was practicing a silent scream, meant to convey a cry for help beneath the sea. The audio recording picked up a faint harmonic note. Not a breath, not static, but a high-pitched tone that wavered like singing. It didn't match any frequency used on set. The sound team saved it, looped it, and layered it into the film's soundscape. Audiences never knew they were hearing it. There were lighter oddities, too. The crabs. Hundreds of mechanical crabs were created for background scenes, and at one point an entire group of them, left idle overnight, were found huddled in one corner of the stage. Huddled. Not scattered. Not arranged. All facing the same direction. Some joked they were having a meeting. Others refused to go near them without turning the power completely off. And then there was the moment the ocean itself seemed to answer. During an exterior shoot near the water's edge, the lead actress stood rehearsing a scene in which her character was meant to reach toward the waves as if saying goodbye to the world she once belonged to. As she did, a rogue wave, not part of the tide pattern, not predicted by marine advisors, rose up and crashed at her feet, soaking her entirely. The crew panicked, worried about equipment. But the actress just stood there, soaked, smiling. "That felt right," she said. "It made it into the final film." Of course, no strange shoot would be complete without an accidental prophecy. A minor extra, who appeared for less than 10 seconds in a marketplace scene, was asked during a press junket what they thought of being part of the film. She smiled and said, "I had a dream before my audition." A girl with red hair looked at me underwater and said, "Don't worry. You've been here before." No one paid it much attention, until 3 other cast members came forward claiming they'd had similar dreams. Same voice. Same message. Coincidence? Maybe. But on this set, coincidence often looked a lot like fate. And then there's the song that almost wasn't. One of the original compositions written for the film, haunting, melancholy, threaded with longing, was nearly cut after test screenings deemed it too strange for a family audience. But the director fought for it. He said it wasn't just a song. It was a confession. They kept it. And that song would go on to win multiple awards, its lyrics quoted on social media for months after release. The melody itself was based on a folk lullaby sung in a dying coastal dialect. Only 2 recordings of the original existed. One of them, strangely enough, had been sent anonymously to the production during early development. No name. Just a file. When the studio tried to trace the email, it didn't exist. In the end, the film became not just a modern retelling, but a stitched tapestry of stories, on screen and behind it. Whispers. Accidents. Hunches that led to magic. A film where the ocean wasn't just a backdrop, it was a participant. Where costumes moved on their own, where voices came back in dreams, and where even the weather seemed to have opinions on the direction of the story. It's rare for a film to carry the weight of myth not only in its plot but in its creation. But this one did. And if you listen closely, just under the surface of every frame, you might still hear it, the echo of something strange, something beautiful, something that reminds you that maybe the sea was never sleeping. Maybe it was watching all along. It begins with a note, not a scream or a spectacle, but a single longing note sung into the vastness of the sea. That note carries, not just through the currents of water, but through the quiet rooms of theaters and the fragile skin of those listening, reaching into places untouched by surface light. From the very start, the film doesn't simply tell its story, it immerses you in it. And for critics and audiences alike, that immersion became something deeper than nostalgia, something weightier than spectacle. It became emotion, woven into visual poetry. One of the most critically dissected events in the film is not a climactic battle, but a moment of stillness. The girl, freshly arrived on land, walks barefoot through the palace gardens for the first time. She cannot speak. She cannot sing. But her silence isn't empty. It's alert, alive. The camera lingers on her expressions, on her breath, on the way she touches flowers, stone, bark, like someone learning the language of a new world through their fingertips. Critics didn't overlook this moment. They leaned into it. They called it a masterclass in visual empathy, the language of discovery, and a performance not made with words but with soul. Because that's what this story dares to do. It pauses. It allows room for recognition. The scene where she first sees fire is another example often noted in critical reviews. It's brief. A hearth crackling in the corner of a warm room. She sees it, kneels before it, and for a heartbeat, we're no longer watching a fantasy. We're watching the awakening of someone who is discovering warmth for the first time. That moment doesn't need dialogue. It doesn't need exposition. It pulses with quiet wonder. And in a cinematic landscape often bloated with noise, that restraint becomes radical. But even in its silence, the film is not timid. It confronts tradition. It reaches backward and forward in the same breath. And nowhere is that more evident than in its portrayal of the central deal, the trade. The voice, for legs. The cost, for freedom. Traditionally, this moment has been framed as one of impulsive sacrifice, the girl giving up her most precious gift for love. But here, it's shaded differently. More complexly. More critically. Critics were quick to note the shift. She doesn't sign the deal out of naive infatuation. She signs it out of desperation for agency. She isn't just choosing a boy. She's choosing choice. In this version, her voice is not simply beauty, it's identity, heritage, memory. And the decision to surrender it becomes a quiet rebellion against the limits placed on her. One reviewer wrote, "It's not about a prince saving a mermaid, it's about a mermaid saving herself from a world that refuses to let her grow." Another event that drew widespread attention was the mirror scene. Not because it's loud, but because it's devastating. As she gazes at her reflection for the first time with human eyes, we see the toll. Her legs tremble. Her body aches. Her silence echoes. The camera doesn't flinch. It stays with her, letting the audience feel the weight of what it means to change, to become something other than what you were born as, and to do so alone. That emotional solitude reverberated through essays, think pieces, panels. Critics called it a moment that transcends genre, a universal metaphor for transformation, and the soul of the film. The villain's introduction, while drenched in theatrical flair and sea-born spectacle, was another focal point. Ursula, portrayed with gleeful menace and strange intimacy, is not a caricature here. She is manipulation wrapped in velvet. Critics admired how her power isn't just magical, it's psychological. She knows what the girl wants, but more importantly, she knows why she wants it. And she uses that knowledge like a blade. Her scenes are less about spellcraft and more about emotional exploitation, drawing eerie parallels to real-world dynamics of power, control, and coercion. But perhaps the most discussed twist in the film isn't a twist at all. It's the absence of one. There is no climactic betrayal by the prince. No moment where he chooses the wrong girl out of malice or pride. Instead, he is deceived. Truly, deeply. Enchanted. Critics praised this decision for preserving the emotional integrity of his character. It allowed the final act not to be about punishment, but redemption, not his, but hers. The tragedy is not that he didn't love her. It's that he did, and it was almost stolen. This reframing restructured the emotional stakes of the story. Rather than building toward a will he or won't he tension, the film focuses on whether the girl can reclaim her truth in time. Whether her voice, figuratively and literally, will find its way back to her. The wedding scene, often played as comic relief in past iterations, is here transformed into a deeply anxious, time-sensitive climax. The tension comes not from spectacle, but from hope on the verge of being lost. And when she does finally get her voice back, it isn't a triumphant return marked by applause. It's a reclamation. She sings, yes. But it's not a performance. It's a remembering. A gathering of every unspoken feeling, every held-back word, and releasing them into a single heart-wrenching song that, according to one critic, does more in 3 minutes than some entire films do in 2 hours. Then, of course, there is the final battle, not just against Ursula, but against fear. Against silence. Against the weight of a world that punishes change. The storm, the shipwreck, the prince fighting not to possess her but to stand beside her, all serve as the external manifestation of the emotional arc. Critics noted that the special effects, while grand, never overpower the story. The sea isn't just chaos, it's memory. It's reckoning. It's the setting of her past and the crucible of her future. The final strike, the one that ends Ursula's reign, isn't framed as a celebration of violence, but a necessary rupture. A breaking of the cycle. But it's the aftermath that delivers the film's deepest emotional resonance. The girl floats. Not triumphant. Not whole. Just there. In between. And then comes her father. This is the true reconciliation the film builds toward. Not the kiss. Not the throne. But the father who finally sees his daughter as someone who no longer belongs to him. The trident glows, not with power, but with acceptance. He gives her legs, not as a reward, not as forgiveness, but as permission. And that gesture, small in action, monumental in meaning, was hailed by critics as the film's most mature and necessary evolution. It turned the ending into not a happily ever after, but a beginning born of earned freedom. The girl does not run into the prince's arms. She walks, steadily, silently, surely, toward her future. Critics responded with essays layered in emotion. One called the ending a meditation on liberation. Another wrote, "This isn't a fairy tale about finding love. It's about finding yourself and being loved for who you truly are." Audience reception echoed that sentiment. People didn't leave theaters humming the songs, though they did that too. They left changed. Reviews spoke of children seeing themselves in her eyes, of adults remembering the first time they felt unheard, unseen, and finally understood. Forums lit up with interpretations, with stories of personal transformation mirrored in her journey. And there were tears. Not just from sadness, but from release. Because the film, in its quiet way, had said something few stories dare to say, that becoming yourself will cost you. It will hurt. It will challenge the ones you love. But in the end, if you hold on, if you don't let go of your voice, you will rise. And when you do, the sea will part. And the world will listen. It didn't start with waves. It started with light. Soft, dappled light dancing across the walls of a warehouse turned into ocean. Before even a single drop of seawater was simulated, before a single tail flicked across the screen, the team behind this story had one question to answer. How do you breathe underwater, without ever leaving land? What followed was a production as ambitious as it was unpredictable, a story not just about mythical mermaids and star-crossed love, but about engineers, dancers, divers, animators, musicians, and costume designers all swimming in the same direction, creating something that never existed before. It was a journey that spanned continents, nearly half a decade, and hundreds of hands, some old, some new, all trying to reach the same elusive magic. The first challenge was also the most invisible: water. Or rather, the illusion of it. Filming underwater had been attempted before, but the technical limitations of facial performance, costume movement, and sound made it a logistical nightmare. So the team, inspired by advancements in virtual production, decided to do something else entirely. They didn't submerge their actors. They submerged reality. Enter dry for wet filming, a technique where actors are filmed on dry stages against blue and green screens, and the water is added in later through CGI. But this wasn't just simple overlay. It was a full immersion in an artificial ocean. Every strand of hair, every fold of fabric, every bubble of breath was digitally created. And to make it believable, they had to study the real thing like never before. Marine biologists were brought in. Fluid dynamicists, yes, real scientists, consulted on how water should move when disturbed by a flick of a fin. The visual effects teams created algorithms that simulated how silk would drift in a current, how skin would refract light below the surface, how eyes would behave when weightless. Animators spent weeks in swimming pools, testing how long hair flows when turning quickly, how bodies float when still. It was, as one producer said, as close to reverse drowning as you can get. But behind the data and the code were artists. The cast trained for months in motion rigs and harnesses. The lead actress, tasked with becoming a mermaid not just in body but in soul, worked with movement coaches to rewire the way she moved. No footsteps, no weight, just fluid, gliding gestures. She practiced slow blinking underwater expressions, breathless transitions from joy to fear to wonder. In one interview, she shared that she spent so long suspended in a rig that she once dreamed she was floating above her own house, unable to touch the ground. They called it mermaid brain. It was exhausting. And beautiful. The tails themselves were a feat of design. Custom-molded silicone and mesh hybrids, they were tailored to each performer's body, taking weeks to sculpt and paint by hand. The process was so intricate that a single tail required nearly 500 hours of work. And once worn, they were part costume, part machine. For certain scenes, tails had internal movement controls, miniature motors to simulate realistic flicks, ripples, and turns. For others, stunt doubles wore green leggings and swam with massive fins that were later replaced digitally. One fun fact that circulated among the crew: the lead actress named her tail Sylvie, she said, because she felt alive. Sylvie had her own rack on set, her own handler, and sometimes even her own schedule. Costumes, especially those worn above water, carried their own magic. Each piece had to balance authenticity with fantasy. The palace outfits were inspired by Caribbean coral, African beadwork, and Renaissance court designs, blending cultures in subtle, symbolic ways. African beadwork and Renaissance court designs, blending cultures in subtle, symbolic ways. The costume department used fabric that shimmered differently depending on the lighting, mirroring the way scales would shift in real water. One of the most photographed dresses in the film used actual seashells, collected and lacquered, sewn individually onto the hem. A single hemline took 3 weeks. And then there was the hair. Creating believable underwater hair was considered one of the toughest challenges of the entire production. Early tests using wigs and wires fell flat, too stiff, too chaotic. So they turned to digital hair simulation. Every strand of hair was tracked and rendered separately in the virtual space. The process was so time-consuming that animators joked, "We rendered more hair than lines of dialogue." The lead's red curls, iconic, unmistakable, took the longest. But once perfected, they moved like whispers, trailing behind her in mesmerizing waves. Music played its own part behind the scenes. The composer, returning to this world with decades of reverence for its melodies, blended the original themes with entirely new compositions, some written to the rhythm of heartbeat drums, others mimicking the slow pulse of the ocean. Live choirs recorded underwater-inspired harmonies, layered to sound distant and submerged. One recording session was held in a cave to capture the natural echo of stone and water. Musicians described the experience as singing into a dream. During vocal rehearsals, the lead actress once broke down while recording a particularly emotional reprise. "It was like saying goodbye to someone I used to be," she admitted. That take, raw and unfiltered, was used in the final film. Among the strangest but most heartwarming moments of production was the jellyfish ballet. Yes, there was a jellyfish ballet. For one underwater sequence, dozens of bioluminescent jellyfish swirl in a hypnotic dance around the main character. To choreograph their motion, the VFX team studied dance troupes. Real dancers performed in fluid motion rigs, emulating how jellyfish might move if they had rhythm. The sequence became so visually striking that it was turned into a standalone looping animation and used for ambient screensavers at the production studio. It was nicknamed Club Glow. And no one can forget the crab puppets. While much of the film relied on CGI, certain practical effects were used for comedic timing and interaction, namely, Sebastian. To get his eye line and presence right, puppeteers built a full-size crab replica, complete with wiggling claws and blinking eyes. The actors would rehearse scenes with real Sebastian, before switching to the voiceover and digital version. The puppet was so beloved that cast members would hide him on set, posing him in unexpected places, riding a skateboard, sitting at the director's monitor, or sipping a tiny espresso from a prop cup. He even had his own trailer sign for a week. On the topic of creatures, another surprise hit among the crew was Flounder's design process. The team tested over 20 versions before settling on the final look. One early concept had him resembling a tropical fish with exaggerated anime eyes. It was vetoed instantly. The final version, sleek, expressive, grounded in realism but bursting with charm, was so universally adored that merch prototypes were designed before the movie even wrapped filming. Filming wrapped in stages. The land sequences, shot in coastal villages and on stunning practical sets, provided a break from the digital ocean. But even then, things never went quite as planned. A gust of wind once knocked over an entire market set minutes before a take. Instead of delaying, the crew kept filming, adjusting blocking in real time. The result was a more organic, wind-blown, emotionally raw moment between the characters, and it stayed in the film. When asked what the hardest day on set was, the director laughed and said, "The easy ones." Because on the hard days, when the rigs wouldn't cooperate, when the effects needed tweaking, when lines had to be rewritten, everyone was alive. Everyone was chasing the same impossible dream. The easy days, he said, meant we weren't pushing hard enough. The most moving behind-the-scenes moment came on the final day of principal photography. The cast and crew gathered around a water tank, now emptied, its mirrors bare. A small speaker played the film's main theme. And as the music swelled, one by one, each department lead placed a symbolic item into the tank, a scale from a tale, a call sheet, a scrap of fabric, a pearl. The director dropped in a single page of script. They watched it float. And in that quiet, heavy stillness, the ocean that never existed said goodbye. 4 months after its release, fans wrote letters, not just about the film, but about how it made them feel. How the behind-the-scenes photos, shared lovingly on social media, reminded them that magic isn't just in the final product. It's in the craft, in the jokes between takes, in the rig that squeaked every time it turned left, in the laughter echoing inside a green-lit warehouse. It's in the stories we tell and the ones we live while telling them. It begins with blue, not just a color, but a world. A world without corners, without edges, without up or down. In this place, light doesn't fall, it dances. It filters. It flutters across the scales of fish and the smooth curves of coral, catching in strands of hair, in shifting sands, in the eyes of a girl who has always looked beyond. The ocean, in this film, is not a backdrop. It is a character, a feeling, a living memory. And this memory has layers. Below the waves, the kingdom unfolds like a secret, lush and wide and filled with movement. Towers of coral stretch upward like cathedrals of glass, seashell arches curl in intricate spirals, and the water is always alive, pulsing with colors that don't exist on land. Every part of it seems to respond to emotion. The space glows brighter when joy fills the scene. It dulls when fear sets in. The ocean itself feels sentient, as though it listens when characters speak, and holds its breath when they fall silent. This is the film's first great accomplishment. It builds a setting that doesn't just frame the action, it enhances it. It tells the story with its very architecture. Take the Coral Palace, where the Sea King holds court. It's not a place of cold power. It's organic, teeming with light filtered through ancient anemones, with walls that shift subtly in tone depending on the conversation taking place inside them. When the girl enters the throne room after defying her father, the walls glow a muted teal, neither cold nor warm, but wounded. It feels like stepping into disappointment itself. The production design, matched with lighting and underwater choreography, renders the emotion not just visible but physical. Then there are the open waters. Wide, unmarked by structures, they offer the illusion of freedom. But they are also unknowable, echoing with the haunting calls of unseen creatures. It's in these vast, endless spaces that the girl often swims alone, gathering objects, daydreaming, asking silent questions. The open ocean reflects her longing. It mirrors her desire to escape, to stretch beyond boundaries. It's beautiful, but it's also isolating. And that duality defines the mood. The sea is both cradle and cage. Cinematography becomes the translator between this mystical world and the audience's eye. Underwater sequences aren't shot to mimic swimming, they're shot to mimic dreaming. The camera drifts, glides, often pushing in slowly as though carried by a gentle current. The lighting isn't naturalistic in the strictest sense. Instead, it's expressive. Light beams pierce through the depths like memories. Bioluminescent creatures flicker to life around dialogue that's meant to reveal inner truths. And shadows are never just dark, they're deep, almost velvety, as though they hold secrets too heavy to rise. The visual language of the underwater world is soft, circular, slow. But then the film shifts. The surface breaks. And with it, the tone transforms. The land sequences are grounded, literally. There's gravity in the way people walk, in the way buildings stand. There's friction, weight, warmth. Gone are the echoing blue halls. In their place, stone courtyards, wooden doors, cobblestone paths warmed by sun. The palace of the prince, built into a cliffside and framed by sprawling gardens, is both grand and worn, an echo of royalty tinged with personal memory. It doesn't feel untouchable. It feels lived in. The curtains are pulled open by hand. The books are dog-eared. The flowers are not perfect, but wild. That was intentional. According to the production designers, the land was meant to feel imperfect but free. A stark contrast to the underwater world's bound beauty. While the sea is flawless and mythical, the surface is flawed and human. And it's in that imperfection that the girl begins to find herself. She walks on legs that ache. She stumbles. She sees fire for the first time, its danger and its warmth. The earth becomes her new ocean. Heavy, unfamiliar, but full of possibility. Camera movement shifts again. Now it doesn't float, it follows. Handheld shots are introduced. Slight tremors in the frame, mimicking breath and heartbeat. The camera becomes more intimate, more curious. We're no longer spectators of a kingdom, we're companions on a journey. And as she begins to understand the land, the camera begins to understand her. Color plays a major role in bridging these worlds. Underwater, the palette leans into blues, purples, soft greens. Everything is cool-toned but radiant. Think moonlight through water. Think twilight beneath the sea. Even the reds of her hair burn subdued, glowing softly rather than blazing. But when she arrives on land, the color story shifts. The world blooms in golds, oranges, sunlit yellows. It's not subtle. The contrast is deliberate. Her new dress, simple, seafoam green, catches the light with every step she takes. And slowly, her world fills with hues she's never known. The pastel pink of a sunrise, the amber flicker of candlelight, the rich brown of books and soil. This visual warmth becomes a language of transformation. And it culminates in the ballroom. A scene flooded with chandeliers, mirrors, and swirling dancers. It should feel overwhelming, and at first it does. She hesitates at the edge. But as she steps into the rhythm, the cinematography changes again. The camera circles. Wide shots give way to close-ups. Reflections play tricks. For the first time, she is not out of place. The light meets her halfway. It's one of the few scenes where the land feels like home. But nothing lingers forever. When the story reaches its storm, the settings collide. The wedding ship, afloat on uncertain waters, becomes a battleground of contrasts. Land and sea, human and magic, truth and illusion. The visuals go dark. Sky and ocean become indistinguishable. The lighting flickers like thunder. It's chaos, but orchestrated chaos. Water bursts onto decks. Lightning splits the sky. And in the heart of it, our heroine moves not as a girl caught between two worlds, but as someone who is both. When Ursula rises, the ocean obeys. The sea becomes monstrous, black, vast, churning. The cinematography becomes frantic. Dutch angles, quick cuts, violent push-ins. It's not meant to look beautiful. It's meant to feel overwhelming. The film doesn't shy away from showing the sea's wrath. But even here, within the darkness, there are glimmers of light, shards of moonlight catching on broken wood, the glowing core of the trident, the red flash of hair amid the black. And when the battle ends, the ocean goes still again. The final scene plays out on the shore, neither land nor sea, but the line between. The setting becomes symbolic. Sand beneath bare feet. Waves kissing ankles. The prince waits, not at the top of some grand staircase, but at the water's edge, where she now walks not as a visitor but as someone reborn. The cinematography slows once more. A wide shot frames the two against the horizon, equal, open, quiet. It's in that stillness that the film says its final word. Because setting, in this story, is never just place. It is emotion. It is growth. It is the silent, unseen third character in every scene. The ocean isn't just water, it's where she began, where she first learned to dream. And the land isn't just a destination, it's the place where she discovered who she was without being told. And the line between them? That's where she now lives. A girl of two worlds, lit by both moonlight and firelight. Home, not in either place, but in herself. It begins with blue, not just a color, but a world. A world without corners, without edges, without up or down. In this place, light doesn't fall, it dances. It filters. It flutters across the scales of fish and the smooth curves of coral, catching in strands of hair, in shifting sands, in the eyes of a girl who has always looked beyond. The ocean, in this film, is not a backdrop. It is a character, a feeling, a living memory. And this memory has layers. Below the waves, the kingdom unfolds like a secret, lush and wide and filled with movement. Towers of coral stretch upward like cathedrals of glass, seashell arches curl in intricate spirals, and the water is always alive, pulsing with colors that don't exist on land. Every part of it seems to respond to emotion. The space glows brighter when joy fills the scene. It dulls when fear sets in. The ocean itself feels sentient, as though it listens when characters speak, and holds its breath when they fall silent. This is the film's first great accomplishment. It builds a setting that doesn't just frame the action, it enhances it. It tells the story with its very architecture. Take the Coral Palace, where the Sea King holds court. It's not a place of cold power. It's organic, teeming with light filtered through ancient anemones, with walls that shift subtly in tone depending on the conversation taking place inside them. When the girl enters the throne room after defying her father, the walls glow a muted teal, neither cold nor warm, but wounded. It feels like stepping into disappointment itself. The production design, matched with lighting and underwater choreography, renders the emotion not just visible but physical. Then there are the open waters. Wide, unmarked by structures, they offer the illusion of freedom. But they are also unknowable, echoing with the haunting calls of unseen creatures. It's in these vast, endless spaces that the girl often swims alone, gathering objects, daydreaming, asking silent questions. The open ocean reflects her longing. It mirrors her desire to escape, to stretch beyond boundaries. It's beautiful, but it's also isolating. And that duality defines the mood. The sea is both cradle and cage. Cinematography becomes the translator between this mystical world and the audience's eye. Underwater sequences aren't shot to mimic swimming, they're shot to mimic dreaming. The camera drifts, glides, often pushing in slowly as though carried by a gentle current. The lighting isn't naturalistic in the strictest sense. Instead, it's expressive. Light beams pierce through the depths like memories. Bioluminescent creatures flicker to life around dialogue that's meant to reveal inner truths. And shadows are never just dark, they're deep, almost velvety, as though they hold secrets too heavy to rise. The visual language of the underwater world is soft, circular, slow. But then the film shifts. The surface breaks. And with it, the tone transforms. The land sequences are grounded, literally. There's gravity in the way people walk, in the way buildings stand. There's friction, weight, warmth. Gone are the echoing blue halls. In their place, stone courtyards, wooden doors, cobblestone paths warmed by sun. The palace of the prince, built into a cliffside and framed by sprawling gardens, is both grand and worn, an echo of royalty tinged with personal memory. It doesn't feel untouchable. It feels lived in. The curtains are pulled open by hand. The books are dog-eared. The flowers are not perfect, but wild. That was intentional. According to the production designers, the land was meant to feel imperfect but free. A stark contrast to the underwater world's bound beauty. While the sea is flawless and mythical, the surface is flawed and human. And it's in that imperfection that the girl begins to find herself. She walks on legs that ache. She stumbles. She sees fire for the first time, its danger and its warmth. The earth becomes her new ocean. Heavy, unfamiliar, but full of possibility. Camera movement shifts again. Now it doesn't float, it follows. Handheld shots are introduced. Slight tremors in the frame, mimicking breath and heartbeat. The camera becomes more intimate, more curious. We're no longer spectators of a kingdom. We're companions on a journey. And as she begins to understand the land, the camera begins to understand her. Color plays a major role in bridging these worlds. Underwater, the palette leans into blues, purples, soft greens. Everything is cool-toned but radiant. Think moonlight through water. Think twilight beneath the sea. Even the reds of her hair burn subdued, glowing softly rather than blazing. But when she arrives on land, the color story shifts. The world blooms in golds, oranges, sunlit yellows. It's not subtle. The contrast is deliberate. Her new dress, simple, seafoam green, catches the light with every step she takes. And slowly, her world fills with hues she's never known. The pastel pink of a sunrise, the amber flicker of candlelight, the rich brown of books and soil. This visual warmth becomes a language of transformation. And it culminates in the ballroom. A scene flooded with chandeliers, mirrors, and swirling dancers. It should feel overwhelming, and at first it does. She hesitates at the edge. But as she steps into the rhythm, the cinematography changes again. The camera circles. Wide shots give way to close-ups. Reflections play tricks. For the first time, she is not out of place. The light meets her halfway. It's one of the few scenes where the land feels like home. But nothing lingers forever. When the story reaches its storm, the settings collide. The wedding ship, afloat on uncertain waters, becomes a battleground of contrasts. Land and sea, human and magic, truth and illusion. The visuals go dark. Sky and ocean become indistinguishable. The lighting flickers like thunder. It's chaos, but orchestrated chaos. Water bursts onto decks. Lightning splits the sky. And in the heart of it, our heroine moves not as a girl caught between two worlds, but as someone who is both. When Ursula rises, the ocean obeys. The sea becomes monstrous, black, vast, churning. The cinematography becomes frantic. Dutch angles, quick cuts, violent push-ins. It's not meant to look beautiful. It's meant to feel overwhelming. The film doesn't shy away from showing the sea's wrath. But even here, within the darkness, there are glimmers of light, shards of moonlight catching on broken wood, the glowing core of the trident, the red flash of hair amid the black. And when the battle ends, the ocean goes still again. The final scene plays out on the shore, neither land nor sea, but the line between. The setting becomes symbolic. Sand beneath bare feet. Waves kissing ankles. The prince waits, not at the top of some grand staircase, but at the water's edge, where she now walks not as a visitor but as someone reborn. The cinematography slows once more. A wide shot frames the two against the horizon, equal, open, quiet. It's in that stillness that the film says its final word. Because setting, in this story, is never just place. It is emotion. It is growth. It is the silent, unseen third character in every scene. The ocean isn't just water, it's where she began, where she first learned to dream. And the land isn't just a destination, it's the place where she discovered who she was without being told. And the line between them? That's where she now lives. A girl of two worlds, lit by both moonlight and firelight. Home, not in either place, but in herself. It was never just a set. Never just a soundstage. From the moment the first team member walked into the studio and saw the massive tank wrapped in shimmering fabric and mirrors angled to catch the illusion of endless water, it felt like stepping into a dream half-formed. The kind of dream that shifts as you chase it. The kind that only lives if everyone believes in it hard enough. The making of this film wasn't a straight path. It twisted and shimmered like the ocean it was trying to portray, fluid, unpredictable, and full of surprises. On paper, it looked like a technical marvel from the start. A retelling of a beloved classic, but this time set entirely between two worlds. One beneath the surface, imagined through layers of digital artistry and movement mechanics. The other, grounded in the messy, sunlit weight of dry land. But no one truly understood the scale of what they were building until they were already halfway submerged in it. The first few weeks were a blend of awe and adaptation. The cast arrived ready to act. Instead, they trained. Not in voice or blocking, but in suspension rigs, swimming simulations, and breathwork. There was no water, not really. Just the idea of it. And to make that idea believable, every actor had to learn how to move like they had been born below the tide. They trained with choreographers who specialized in aerial movement. The harnesses were temperamental, often leaving bruises and blisters. The lead actress once joked that she felt more like a circus performer than a mermaid. But even as the discomfort set in, so did something else, fluidity. One day, after a long rehearsal of a swimming scene done entirely in the air, she landed with a laugh and said, "I stopped pretending I was floating. I just was." The director clapped and whispered, "Now we begin." That became a kind of motto on set. And they needed it, because things didn't always go smoothly. One morning, the motion capture suits glitched. The underwater sensors weren't syncing with the simulated lighting, and what was supposed to be a serene drift through coral ruins turned into a chaotic sequence of tangled wires and flickering screens. Instead of panicking, the cinematographer, barefoot, sipping his third espresso, taped a mirror to the lens and reframed the shot using real-time reflection. "Let the water bend," he said, adjusting the angle. The resulting footage was so hauntingly dreamlike that they recreated the technique for future scenes. It wasn't part of the plan. But it became part of the magic. Between takes, the crew was a blend of laughter and quiet focus. The actress playing Ursula kept spirits high with impromptu karaoke between takes, belting out everything from gospel to 80s rock with her octopus arms still strapped to her back. Her booming laugh would echo through the soundstage, often interrupting the serious, brooding rehearsal of a nearby dramatic scene. No one minded. "It reminded us that we were playing," said the assistant director. "And play is where magic lives." The prince's actor, usually reserved, was notorious for losing his place during table reads, but never during filming. He claimed that he only found his rhythm once the camera rolled, and that trying to perform emotion in fluorescent lighting without costume was like pretending to fall in love with a ghost. But once in costume, once surrounded by the set pieces built to mirror a life by the sea, he changed. Even the extras whispered about how he felt different once the cape went on. The relationship between the two leads, crucial to the soul of the film, developed slowly, organically. Off-camera, they would sit together watching playback, discussing not just lines but feeling. They created a shared playlist, filled with songs they believed their characters would have loved, everything from soft acoustic ballads to stormy orchestral movements. Between takes, the music would play through someone's phone in a quiet corner, and sometimes they'd dance. But not all moments were soft. The day they filmed the transformation sequence, tensions were high. The scene required a blend of performance and pain, her giving up her voice, her tail splitting into legs, the entire world shifting around her. It was technically complicated, emotionally draining, and needed to be captured in just 2 shots. Everyone was quiet on set. No joking. No music. When the take began, the air shifted. The actress moved through the harness with the grace of someone surrendering and rising all at once. At one point, the director wiped a tear from his face and whispered, "Don't cut." When it ended, no one clapped. They just let the silence hold it. Later, the editor would say, "You could hear the heartbreak in the wires." Another unexpected star of the set? The mermaid tails. Each was custom-molded, hand-painted, and individually animated. But they weren't just props, they were personalities. The lead tail, named Siren by the effects team, required 4 people to manage during full-rig scenes. It once refused to flick properly during a crucial wide shot, prompting the crew to take a 15-minute break. During that pause, someone slipped a pair of sunglasses on Siren and posed it in a lounge chair. The next day, the photo was printed and taped to the director's monitor. It stayed there until wrap day. Not everything strange came from human hands. The set was haunted, or so they claimed. Late-night shoots were always the spookiest. The ocean blue lights left on for ambient continuity created long shadows, and sound echoes off the walls just right. Cast and crew began to report odd little moments, lights flickering on cue, props shifting slightly between takes, voices heard in the empty tank. A grip swore he heard a splash one night, even though no water was present. Another time, the lead actress said she felt a pull on her harness just before take, as though something wanted to keep her aloft a second longer. They laughed about it. But they also started greeting the stage every morning, "Good morning, C." And at night, "Thank you, C." It became routine. A kind of respect. Meal breaks were their own kind of magic. The caterers, inspired by the oceanic theme, began serving thematic dishes. Seaweed wraps, blue-iced cupcakes, grilled shrimp over driftwood-style planks. Every Friday was Under the Sea Day, where the crew wore ocean-colored shirts and voted for the best sea creature vibe. It begins, not with a question, but with a pull, a longing that tugs from somewhere too deep to name. Beneath the shimmering waves and glistening surface, beneath the music and the myth and the salt-kissed romance, this story is not simply about a mermaid. It's about yearning, about voice, about transformation. And it is through that lens that the film reveals itself, not as a fairy tale reimagined, but as an echo of all the silent things we carry. At the heart of everything lies a question that lingers unspoken. What does it cost to become who we truly are? From the first moment she swims into frame, she's already reaching. Not just for the surface, but for the parts of herself that have been pressed down by generations of fear and tradition. Her world under the sea is beautiful, yes, but also confined. She is cherished, but she is silenced. Surrounded by sisters and songs, by duties and expectations, she is taught not to dream too loudly, not to look too far, not to question the rules written in tides before she was born. And yet she does. Her collection of surface treasures is more than a curiosity cabinet. It's a symbol of imagination, of inherited rebellion. Every object she finds, rusted forks, shattered glass, forgotten maps, tells her that there is more. Not just out there, but within. She doesn't want to escape the sea because it's terrible. She wants to know who she is when no one is telling her who to be. This is where the film's first major theme takes root: identity through transformation. When she trades her voice for legs, it is not a simple bargain. It is a metaphor writ in sea foam and pain. She chooses to walk into the unknown without the very thing that defines her: her voice, her history, her music. This is not just a sacrifice. It's a test of self. Can she remain herself when stripped of the thing that once made her seen? And what unfolds is not the tale of a girl rescued, but a girl becoming. Each step she takes, painful and unsure, mirrors the journey of anyone who has ever chosen to walk away from what was expected in order to find what was true. Her silence becomes a new language, a way of seeing, of listening. And in that space where she cannot speak, she learns how to connect not through words, but through presence. Here, the film explores another profound theme: the complexity of voice and silence. Voice, in this story, is layered. It is not merely sound. It is expression, identity, agency. When she gives up her voice, she does not just lose her ability to speak, she loses the currency of recognition. People no longer see her. They project onto her. They love the idea of her, not the truth of her. And yet, in that silence, she does not disappear. She asserts herself. She moves. She loves. She fights. And when her voice returns, not with a grand aria, but with trembling emotion, it is not just her singing again. It is her returning to herself. She sings not to win love. She sings to be whole. Layered through all of this is the haunting symbolism of mirrors and reflections. The mirror, present both literally and thematically, becomes a device through which identity is questioned. What do we see when we look at ourselves? What does the world see? There is the version of the girl that floats through palace halls in silence, beautiful and mysterious. And then there is the one who swims in moonlight, who laughs, who speaks, who dares. The mirror asks, which one is real? This duality is mirrored in the Sea Witch, a figure of both terror and twisted empathy. Ursula is not simply a villain. She is a cautionary reflection, the embodiment of what happens when longing curdles into bitterness, when transformation is used not for growth, but for control. She, too, was silenced. She, too, was cast out. But unlike the girl, she chooses vengeance over voice. Their confrontation, then, is not just good versus evil. It's self versus shadow. Ursula's tentacles wrap like doubts, her spells woven from manipulation rather than magic. She doesn't force the girl to change, she offers it. That's the sinister brilliance. Ursula doesn't steal. She bargains. She exploits the longing she once felt. And in that dynamic, the film explores the danger of conditional acceptance, of being told, you can have what you want if you stop being who you are. The prince becomes another vessel for theme. Not a savior. Not a fantasy. But someone caught between memory and reality. He remembers the voice that saved him, the sound that cut through fear and waves. But when presented with silence, with mystery, he struggles. His arc is not about rescuing the girl. It's about seeing her, listening to what is not spoken, recognizing love not as spectacle, but as quiet truth. Their relationship, slow and uncertain, is a dance of mutual discovery. He learns to see beyond sound. She learns to trust presence. And in that subtle unfolding, the film offers a meditation on connection without performance. Love not born of grandeur, but of recognition. The settings themselves become symbolic players. The ocean, vast, shifting, beautiful, represents both home and boundary. It nurtures, but it contains. Its rules are ancient, its guardians stern. The land, in contrast, is flawed, chaotic, but open. It is real. It is heavy. When she first walks on the beach, the pain she feels in every step is a symbol of rebirth. It is a baptism of discomfort. And like all who enter a world not made for them, she must suffer before she is seen. The shoreline, where water meets sand, becomes sacred. It is where decisions are made, where endings become beginnings. It is neither land nor sea, but the space between. And it is there that the girl, reborn, meets her future, not as someone saved, but as someone chosen. Her father's arc deepens the thematic current of letting go. He is not cruel. He is afraid. He fears the loss of his daughter to a world he cannot control. His love becomes armor. But as he watches her rise, fight, and choose, he begins to understand that love cannot be possession. In the end, when he gives her the gift of freedom, not by force, but by grace, it is the ultimate act of acceptance. He sees her not as a child needing protection, but as a woman who has found her own voice. That scene, where he lifts his trident not in punishment but in blessing, is filled with unspoken emotion. It is forgiveness. Surrender. Love in its purest form. And when the girl walks toward the prince, not rushed, not swept, but calm, assured, she carries all the themes of the film within her: longing, identity, courage, sacrifice, voice, and freedom. She is not who she was. She is not who others wanted her to be. She is who she chose to become. The symbolism extends even to the ocean's creatures: the loyal crab who worries but never wavers, the flounder who sees the world through innocent eyes, the seagull who misunderstands everything, yet always shows up. They are symbols of friendship born from belief, not perfection. They remind us that support often looks like chaos, laughter, and relentless love. And the sea itself? It never punishes. It waits. It watches. It holds the memories of those who leave and the echoes of those who return. Because in the end, this film is not just about a mermaid. It's about anyone who has ever given up something precious to chase a feeling they couldn't name. Anyone who has stood between two worlds and wondered which one would make them whole. Anyone who has learned that voice is not just sound, but truth. That love is not rescue, but recognition. That freedom is not found in escape, but in becoming. It's about stepping out of the waves, soaked in your own courage, and finally saying, "This is me, and I am home." It started with a question that echoed more like a whisper than a demand. How do you tell a story underwater without drowning in it? Not just logistically, not just visually, but emotionally. How do you make an audience feel like they're submerged, weightless, suspended in a place both dangerous and beautiful, mythic and intimate? The answer wasn't simple. It was layered, like the ocean itself. This film didn't just require storytelling. It required reimagining the very tools used to tell stories. Filmmaking, in its purest form, is illusion. Light, sound, movement. But when the setting defies gravity and the characters are born of folklore and longing, illusion alone isn't enough. It needed immersion. It needed to breathe like the sea. Every frame had to ripple. Every scene had to float. The first and perhaps most transformative technique was the use of dry-for-wet filming. Instead of placing the actors in actual tanks, an approach that limits expression, creates bubbles, and risks stilted movement, the filmmakers relied on groundbreaking motion rigs, complex harness systems, and blue screen environments that simulated buoyancy. The cast trained not to mimic swimming, but to embody weightlessness. They had to unlearn how to walk, how to turn, how to let their bodies glide. This technique reshaped everything from blocking to lighting. Actors weren't just told where to stand, but how to drift. Lighting rigs moved with them, creating shifting shadows that mimicked the distortion of sunlight through water. The cinematographer, in interviews, described the process as painting with motion.